Who's out there in chat land already? Yeah. Let's see if this actually goes. Should be starting in a second. I talked to Tommy Gibbons for the first time in a while. Allegedly, he's sending over some impulses. So we're going to add that to the Helix and give it a try later on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got my on-air light now, so we'll see if it keeps people from knocking while we're doing this. In fact, I'm gonna turn off my phone. I don't need to talk to anybody. Right. All right. Welcome to Evidence-Based Audio number 175. This is Terminal Indecision. All right. I know a lot of us do the same thing, but I keep going back and forth between dive-only tremolos, full floating, and for years and years and years, I ran a trem setter. But then I never did pull up on my tremolo, so I just got rid of that. But I've been running dive only for a long time and super happy with it, especially for recording. And then for some reason I started running full floating, and I don't know why. And now it's driving me nuts. It seems like I was being able to keep it in tune well enough where I didn't want to completely kill myself every 2 seconds, but I was still very frustrated. I enjoyed it, but now I think it's time to lock them to dive only again. And I did lock one of mine to dive only, and I own a whole bunch of those Geldo back boxes, which are like the ESP arming adjusters. I have no idea where I put them. I probably took them all apart and threw them away. I never really used them right. So I was looking on Amazon, and man, I don't know if you guys were into this kind of thing. The back box around 2007 or so, it started getting really popular, I think. And they were just impossible to get. Like there were a couple guys that could bring them in from Germany or something. It was the weirdest thing. Like it's some kind of Silk Road illegal drug or something. And then this Ibanez backstop just completely disappeared. But now I'm looking on Amazon. They have the same deal here. It's like the Ibanez backstop or ESP arming adjuster or whatever. $42. And there's actually a ton of this stuff on here. So I just ordered this one. And, here you go. Here's your Janglish or Changlish or whatever. Remain your guitar in tune. Okay, I will remain my guitar in tune. It's just all brass thing. I wonder, is brass really strong enough to hold its shape here? It seems very similar to the older versions, but with less crappity parts inside it. I think this might actually be an improvement. Now that I'm looking at it, it may not exactly work with my spring setup, but it might. We'll see. So I was looking on here. Not thanks for your purchase. Where's the where did they go? Amazon tremolo stabilizer. Okay, hold on. If I go on here, there's actually tons of these things. Oh, and there's like a locking spring claw, but still it costs more than the Sure Claw or whatever. So here's one that looks exactly like the old ESP arming adjuster, as far as I can tell. Even has a ball bearing at the end, which is kind of nice. I wonder is that spring loaded, or is that going to start clicking around, or how's that going to work? But it looks cool. Seeing $21, man, and it says the Amazon's choice. This might actually be better. I wonder if I should grab one of these just to try it out alongside the other thing. Let me just look around. So here's the same company that I just ordered from has a single one. And it looks like I don't know why they bolt in from the side. I'm really not sure how this thing is. If it like locks it or something. It's kind of a strange design, though. I think this might be similar to how Ibanez had done it in the past. It seems screwy to me. I like the way these things screw in, though. I know it's more holes in your guitar, but it's not right underneath the thing, so you can actually get to it. Installing these looks a lot better. I'll have a look at something else in a second, but see who else is selling something. Let's see. Make sure to can add bee wax to set the friction squeak between tip and block. Does that mean it takes away the squeak to put? Do I put wax right there? That's not a bad idea. I was just using pedal board Velcro. You know, the fluffy side of it. Yeah, we'll see how this works. But what I really wanted to see. See, there's a dual one that looks just like the ESP one. The old ESP one. I actually saw a bunch of these things on here. So let's look at this video real quick. Whoa. Jeez. Wow. Yeah, see, that has two ball bearings on here. Actually, wow, this is half the price of the one I just bought. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Sorry. I don't know. Well, we'll see. We'll see how these work, but this looks good too. Does this not exist anymore? I wonder why this one didn't come up. Well, that's what I get for not looking. Or I could buy them both and compare them. Oh, this one looks chintzier. But it's the same thing. So it's two of these. It's like the old Geldo back box, but it's dual. Like I say, I really like this ball bearing tip here. This kind of makes a lot of sense to me. But you know what? I don't. Well, we'll see how this works. So if you were really into this stuff back in the day, there was this guy Joe Enemaker, I think Joe Emenmaker, whatever. He would he had these things on. He's the guy who got us all interested in these back boxes, I think. Let's see. So he has look at the old Ibanez backstop. So this is pretty much what that thing was based on. Let's see. It says compared to the trem setter, and that was the one I used to use way back in the day when the trem setter first came out. I used it, but it really just was too chintzy. It never seemed to really work all that well. It says compared to the trem setter and the adjusting process, the backstop was a marvelous simplicity. The only holes to drill were a couple of screws to hold it into the cavity. Once you did that, it was part of the adjustment, not held in by a hook like the trem setter. The adjustment was much nicer using a threaded rod instead of a stop collar. Yep. Using a threaded rod, you can make an adjustment of a couple of turns, and if it made things worse, you could always undo those turns and get it back to where it was before. With the trem setter, once you tried a new adjustment, there was no way to get back to the old one. Yep. Legend has it that Ibanez started shipping these on some of their guitars until the day they were forced to stop by Gibson, who claimed to hold a patent on that design, which might be why all the other stabilizers like this are from other countries. Wow, is that just another... I know people got a lot of hate for Gibson. I just don't care about those kind of guitars, but I do hear a lot about these patent claims and things. I hope that's not true. It says ease of adjustment. The backstop and the other two models using the backstop design is fairly straightforward to adjust. It would be nice if there's some holes in the side of the nuts you're allowed to turn with a little pin. I haven't tried the backstop. Okay, which one is this? This is the Ibanez backstop. Now, the thing about this compared to the backstops is that there's two of them, and there was just a Steve Vai video. I was just asking about this, and somebody put a video up showing Steve Vai's back of his guitar, and he had something like this, but it didn't look quite like this. Let me hold on. Let me see if I can pull this up for you. Sorry, should have had this. Should have had this ready. I think it was on a Luthier's forum. Let me see. Sorry, it's going to take me a second. It was on TGP, and the search function is pretty bad. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here's a picture. Actually, this might be the Ibanez one. Hold on. Let me.
It's custom made as well, right?
Yeah, that's just. Yeah, I mean, it's very. Getting into the bowels of Steve Vai's guitar. I put a little tissue in there because the springs are always resonating, you know, and this kind of tightens up the sound quite a bit. But I use this.
Okay, this one right here. I'm trying to get the best view of it that I can. It's not really. Actually, this looks like the old Ibanez backstop, doesn't it? It's got like plastic parts on it. So I'm thinking if he uses it, I'll give it a try. He does a lot more tremolo work than me. I just do some dive bombs. And I was enjoying the kind of back and forth around the center bend wobble thing, but we'll see how this goes. I'll put this on my other guitar, and then if I like it, I'll put it on my other one, and we'll start all this nonsense again. Let's see, what else was he showing here? Oh, yeah, there's this Maglock one. Hold on, where is it? So this is kind of interesting. This came out a little bit ago. I'm not really sure how this worked. So she uses a magnet. I wonder if somebody has it. Yeah, $45. So I wonder if there's one on here. Let's take a look. Maglock Tremolo Stabilizer. Okay, let's take a look. Super V. You know, I think I did see a video of this before. Guitar World Super V Maglock. Okay, let's see what Guitar World has to say. Yeah. The 0 Point is another thing that Ibanez made, and I think again Ibanez got like nailed for it. 0 Point was pretty much like a back box, but gigantic, right? Yeah, here's the 0 Point system. Let's see if we can get a big picture. So see, you're doing the same thing here. You have this this pre-tension spring that's gonna push against the sustain block, or whatever you call that block. So you're pushing up against the tremolo thing. It's doing pretty much the same thing, but it is much bigger and seems much more stable. And I wonder why. I wonder why Steve Vai doesn't use this thing. It's interesting. I don't know. Let's check out this. Ooh, that's not what I want to show. Super V. Let's take a look at this.
Hey, what's up? It's Paul from Guitar World, and no, we're not reviewing this fine Fender Stratocaster, but what lies underneath the Super V Maglock anti-deflection device. Let's check it out. Super V is well known for making their frictionless Blade Runner bridge, which is an awesome bridge which I reviewed not too long ago, which really adds a bunch of sustain, keeps your time. It's an awesome, a brand new device which actually improves on another aspect of this design of a tremolo, of a non-locking tremolo device with their MagLock anti-deflection device. Now, how this thing works, I will have to explain it very carefully. To begin with, the Super V MagLock anti-deflection device is easy to install. Simply attach a screw.
Is that part of the video? No way Guitar World would upload that, right?
Lock anti-deflection device is easy to install. Simply attach a screw into your trem cavity and then hook the MagLock into your tremolo block, just like your tremolo springs. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now, essentially, what this does is the MagLock uses rare earth magnets, which happen to be one of the strongest type of magnets available, to keep your floating tremolo from moving when you bend your strings. So, which I will demonstrate shortly, if I do a double stop bend, sometimes on a standard floating tremolo, some of the strings kind of go sharp or slightly out of tune, and what this does is it kind of keeps all your bends in tune and true. Also, just like Super V's other products, such as the Blade Runner Bridge, it does other great things, such as giving you more sustain on your tremolo, as well as giving your strings less tension when you bend them on the Trans Super V MagLock anti-deflection device. Now you'll see on this, I'm going to have to fight it a little bit to keep it, to do this double stop bend and keep it in tune. Here it's same type of bend, ring true. The Super V MagLock anti-deflection device is a must-have for anyone who uses a floating tremolo without any locking tuners.
We'll try one out. We got people. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about today. Something weird's been going on here, and that is that the live sound industry has gone nuts. They're paying bands way more than they ever paid. There's more work than there has ever been before, and they're paying the engineers more. And so we were trying to train, I don't even know what you call them, PA techs or live sound engineers or whatever. We're trying to train these guys as fast as possible and get out as many as we can. And when we had the little kids bands going all the time, I wrote something out for the parents to help them understand the PA system when I wasn't there. And I'm going to go through this, and I want you guys, hopefully over the next couple of weeks or whatever, if you really hate it, I'm giving you homework. Tell me what I should be including and whatnot. For the most part, we're going to be replacing all this. Most of our bands are running XR 18s or whatever, but just for the fundamentals here. And I know I'm not covering the same fundamentals as other people tend to cover. They're not just paying the front of house guys good. They're paying, I'm blown away by how much money people are making right now. Like way more than I ever made recording albums. I mean, way more, way more. It's crazy. It's absolutely bonkers what's going on right now. At least here in Hawaii. So anyway, this is something that I made for the parents to have. And I want you to let me know. It's short, okay? It's real short. I hope it's short enough. It's probably a lot of stuff that should be covered in here, but let's just go through it. So I just called it PA System Basics. And it says the PA, or public address system, allows for your audience to hear your band. The PA is largely responsible for the absolute volume of your shows, as well, and the mix or proportion of overall sound each instrument or element contributes. Okay, that could probably be worded way better. I didn't even understand it when I read it at first, so let me say it again. The PA, or public address system, allows your audience to hear your band. The PA is largely responsible for the absolute volume of your show, as well, and the mix or proportion of the overall sound each instrument or element contributes. Why is there as well? Let me just get rid of that as well. Let's see if this makes better sense. The PA is largely responsible for the absolute volume of your show and the mix or proportion of the overall sound of each. Oh man, we should word this different. What I'm trying to say here, and I hope you can understand, the PA system tells the absolute volume of the show. Once it passes the threshold of the loudest acoustic instrument on there, which is probably going to be your cymbals or something, your drums. And it's also what controls the proportion of sound. So as well as the mix. How about it's not and, as well as? Does this work? The PA is largely responsible for the absolute volume of your show as well as the mix or proportion of the overall sound each instrument or element contributes. I think that's how I had it. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I have it as the 4 M's. And you guys fans of old recording in back in the day, not so old because it's post MIDI. We used to have like the 4 M's of like mixer, multi-track, MIDI, and musician. What was it? Or maybe there's 3 M's. Mixer, MIDI, and multi-track, right? That was the 3 M's maybe. Wow. Sorry, I'm spacing this one, but I remember back in the day. Run cable's like a champ. So the 4 M's are a traditional way of looking at and understanding the role and function of a PA system. They are 1, the microphone. A microphone is a device that converts sound energy into electrical signals, which can then be amplified and sent to speakers. Basically, the job of a microphone is to make your voice, or whatever instrument is pointed at, louder. Number 2 is the mixer. And, when I say microphone, of course, you guys are out there in whataboutism land. That could be any source you got, your keyboard output. I'm just using microphone because that's the most obvious one. People think it'll make a voice louder. But, of course, you can plug other instruments into the mixer. All that babbling. Let me go on. 2, the mixer. A mixer is a device that controls the relative levels of different instruments as well as determining the overall or absolute volume of the speakers at a show. I know technically the power amp does that, but really it's what the mixer is telling the power amp, unless you want to run up the power amp to turn up those. Or if you got self-powered speakers, then you got another volume knob, but you know what I'm saying. A mixer, in the simplest terms, determines the mix of each instrument's volume. I know it sounds like a tautology. A mixer, in simplest terms, determines the mix of each instrument's volume to both to the audience and performers, as well as sends and returns to effects and signal processors. A mixer will usually have several parallel and series signal paths controlling a wide range of routing and level control functions. Yeah, it gets confusing real quick, right? But as long as you understand what one channel is doing, you can generally understand what they're all doing. Number 3, the mains. The mains are the speakers that the audience hears. At a large show, the mains will only be perceptible by the audience and have no effect on what the performers hear unless they go out in front of the stage. Again, yes, there's whataboutisms, there's caveats, whatever. Number 4, the monitors. Monitors are what the performers hear. At a large enough show, the audience will not hear the monitors, but only the mains. That's important to think about. At a large enough show, the audience is really only going to hear the mains. They're not going to hear the monitors. Hopefully, they're not going to hear any stage volume nonsense either. The mains and monitors can have widely different mixes or wildly different mixes. I wonder what I should say. Maybe I'll just say wildly. Wildly. How about this? The mains and monitors can have wildly different mixes as they perform extremely different functions. And I really, we got to know that. We got to emphasize that as much as we possibly can. The monitors are not the mains. The mains are not the monitors. Unless you're playing a small show where you're having to use them as both. And our kids can do that. And they've had to do that many, many times. And there's ways around it. But, right now they're getting paid enough where they're getting monitors and mains. And in some cases, they're getting a monitor mixer. How about that? So they are doing completely different things. The monitors are for what the artist is hearing in order for them to perform their best. In fact, If you make okay, just like when I always talk about ergonomics on here, if you make a good enough mix, if you make things easy enough on the musicians, where they don't have to wait for setup time, they don't have to mess around with their vocals, they like everything how it sounds. They find an easy time of getting around the studio. They know where their food is. They know the happier the band is, the better it's going to sound. That's true in the recording studio usually, and I believe it in live sound too. If the band has a good monitor mix and they're really happy about how things sound on stage, it's going to be way easier for you to get a good sound out there, because all you're going to do is make them louder instead of trying to create a mix, trying to create something out of a bunch of unhappy guys that can't hear themselves. So monitors are extremely important. Depending on the mixer in use, each monitor can even have its own mix. And nowadays, where you can carry a phone and you can change the artist's mix, or the artist can make their own mix on their own monitors. And as we're going to in-ears and stuff, things are changing. And so I put a picture up. There's probably like a Mackie, 1642 or some kind of thing like that. Oh yeah, it is. It says Mackie 1642 or 1202, it doesn't matter. And so I just put a typical mixing console you'll find at a small show. Shown here is a Mackie 1642. Okay. The mixer is the central control station of the entire show and needs to be understood well in order to put on a proper performance. As most basic form, a mixer consists of a number of input channels where you plug in the instruments and microphones individually, and a number of output channels that send an entire mix to the speakers. Usually the mixer will have a number of auxiliary functions, including sends and returns, where signal processing gear will be inserted. Larger mixers will also have multiple subgroups or buses, which allow instruments to be controlled and routed as a group. Let's look at an input channel of your typical live mixer. And so, getting into the specifics of how a basic mixer works. And one of the things that we have at so many of these things for convenience and whatever else is the subgroup or the bus. In Reaper, kind of the folder. This is so you could take one or two faders and control the volume of a whole bunch of different instruments at once, or a whole group like vocals or whatever. Sorry about this saxophone, but this is saxophone lessons time. All right. Boy, what been going on? This may be too much. I may have to finish this at a different time. Let me just check on the schedule real quick. I had no idea we would have, sorry. Two seconds here, I'm just looking at the schedule. Let's just take a look. One of the things I like to emphasize to people is when you see, even on the giant, gargantuan mixer, if you can understand one channel, you're probably going to be okay with most of it. Of course, there's a center section that might have some extreme capabilities, but if you understand what your buses are doing and your sends and everything, well, we'll get there. So it says, even a single input channel can look pretty daunting, but let's look at each section individually. And as long as each function is understood, you can look at a mixer as just a number of duplicates of the same basic functions. So you get one. Oh yeah. As soon as that comes in Amazon, I'll make a video and we'll try it out. But yeah, see ya. The input channel is what determines how loud a signal is relative to other signals, where it goes, and in most cases, what is done to change it, as with signal processing such as compressors, equalizers, and reverb. Often a mixer will have a range of signal processing built in, especially nowadays with these digital consoles. They'll have their own reverbs and delays and things like that. A mixer is usually defined by the number of input channels it has, as well as the number of subgroups it features. In the case of the Mackie 1642, it has 16 input channels, 4 subgroups, and a stereo main out, hence the 16, 4, and the 2. Different mixers will have different configurations, but this guide should generally suffice to understand the basic concepts. Shown to the left is a single input channel of the 1642. In the case of this mixing console, there are 7 more channels exactly like this, with another 4 stereo channels, which are slightly different, bringing the total number of channels to the advertised 16s. Often you will have to look at a mixer to be sure there are really as many channels as claimed, and which are full feature channels and which are, as in this case, to put it charitably, less capable channels. So that's something to look at in mixers. They're going to claim that it has a certain number of channels, but how many of those are actual full feature channels? How many of those have mic preamps? Those are things that are going to matter. It's not as important anymore. Nowadays, we seem to be able to get bajillions of channels for super cheap. But, so at the top of the input channel, we have what is often called the I/O or input-output section. It includes a mic input at the top, your XLR, right? A line input in the middle, and an insert on the bottom. Only one of these two inputs should be used at once, and most consoles have a switching jacket for the line input, which will bypass the mic input, but it's best to check the manual to be sure. Generally, you will be okay hooking anything with an XLR output into the mic input, though line-level sources may overload it. Even though the line input is a 1/4-inch female jack, you shouldn't plug a guitar straight into it unless it has a DI function. So there's a lot of technical things to think about in there. But in general, a balanced signal is going into this XLR input. You might overload that mic preamp. So you might have to stick that thing into a line input. Even if it is an XLR out, you might have to make an adapter or whatever. And also, unless it has a DI function, a direct input or direct injection, whatever they're... you shouldn't plug a guitar straight in. It'll rob the highs and lows. So the same thing is what happens if you don't plug in a guitar into a DI box and just plug it straight into a mic preamp. You get some problems. Same as you plug in into the line input. You guys can argue about impedance later. This is just the basics. Plug a guitar into a DI input. That's the easy way to go. The insert jack allows you to plug in the TRS end of a Y cable in, giving you a send and return that breaks the signal. Of course, that's not always true. Sometimes they have separate 1/4-inch inputs, but in most cases, there's like a single unbalanced tip ring sleeve send and return. So you just got one jack, and you gotta break that out with the Y cable to get into your effects, whatever your compressor, whatever you're putting in there. The only signal, and so remember, when you say breaks a signal, that's taking... If you plug into that insert, then only the signal that comes back from the send is going to go to the output. So you could actually plug into a channel right there and completely ignore everything that came in before it. That's the break. If we really get into patch bass and stuff, we had the normal, half normal, parallel, all that. Okay. The only signal the mixer sees after the insert is that which it receives on its return side. In the case of this mixer, plugging a jack in halfway actually splits the signal and gives you a direct out while still allowing the normal signal flow past the I/O section. So that'd be your half normal setting. If you plug it in halfway, it still goes to the output, but it also, whatever this input section, wherever the insert send is, goes straight to your recording device or whatever. Usually the insert will be used for signal processors that are meant to be in series or work on 100% of the signal, such as dynamic range control devices like compressors or noise gates. You could also have something that has a mix on it, but you would hopefully be in control of that mix. From here, the signal flows down to, and hello on the YouTube and Twitch there. Let's see, the input control section. Here is a gain knob which allows you to set the mic or line input to the proper operating level. It is important to understand that this knob isn't to control the volume the audience hears of the particular instrument assigned to this channel. Rather, it is to set the level of this input to a level that works correctly with the available dynamic range of the mixer itself. Often when used with a microphone input, this section is referred to as a mic preamp. The job of the mic preamp, I know the true believers are going to tell you this, the job of the mic preamp is to make the sound that people actually want to hear because they make magical junk on it, but we explore that on so many episodes on here that I'm not going to bother with that right now. The job of the mic preamp in this case is to make the mic signal loud enough so that it falls within the proper operating level of the mixer. Most of the signal path on the mixer wants a signal of a certain signal strength, and this gain knob is going to get it there. And this gain knob is also going to make it loud enough so that when you take that direct out and send it to your recording device, you got all the juice you need. Of course, in today's digital world, it's not even that important to get all that loud, right? But that's what this is doing. And that's where you're setting here. So if you're not going to turn this thing up in order to make the voice louder in the PA. You're going to turn it until it's the proper level, and you're going to use the channel faders to make the correct mix. Underneath the gain control, so sometimes there's like a light on there that'll let you know when it's in the right range, or if it overloads, like maybe it'll overload light. Sorry. Underneath the gain control is a switch for a high pass filter. If this switch is activated, a filter is applied which removes all audio below a certain frequency. This is useful for removing stage rumble and other low frequency noises. A general rule of thumb is that if a part of the frequency range is not helpful for that particular instrument, it's a good idea to get rid of it. For recording engineers, this is the hardest thing in the world to do, is to actually not to high pass an instrument. We'll do that happily. It's to low pass an instrument. There's all kinds of hash and nonsense on the treble end of so many things that so many of your best mixes that you love actually have most of that junk taken out of instruments that don't need it. But for me, I know personally, and most engineers I know, we hate taking out the treble of something. We might turn it up or down a little bit in a little peaky EQ thing, but it's just so scary to lose that high end. And I think that comes from the days of tape where we're so worried about the high end, and maybe the digital guys don't worry about that as much. Or I say the guys who are raised on digital. I'm a digital guy. So even instruments traditionally thought of to be bassy in nature, such as bass guitar and kick drums, can often benefit from this high pass filter. That's true. So it's counterintuitive, but your kick drum may get a lot thumpier when you get rid of some of this mud at the bottom. And this is why people trip out on bass traps, because they're trying to get more bass into their mixes. And you're putting in bass traps into your rooms that get rid of so much bass, but that's what it takes to know what you're hearing. Okay. From here, the signal goes to the auxiliary sends. Aux sends are a parallel signal path that are used to route the channel signal into other buses. It's important to remember that these sends are in parallel with the main signal path and do not affect it for the most part. A look at the consoles, well, that's not quite true. That it affects it in the fact that it's going to send some kind of signal to the main signal path, but it's not breaking the main signal path, if that makes sense to you. A look at the console's block diagram is often helpful in understanding what each send does, as well as all mixers will have different ways of routing the aux signals. So here's where it gets really important, the pre and post. And this is where I was having a lot of trouble with one of the newer engineers, showing him something. So I'm showing a block diagram here. Note the pre button that switches aux sends 1 and 2 between pre-fader and post-fader. A pre-fader signal ignores the channel fader and takes this level control only from the auxiliary knob itself. A post-fader send is modified relative to the settings of the channel fader. In general, pre-fader sends are used for things like monitor sends, where you don't want the main channel mix to affect the send in any way, and the post-fader sends are used for things like reverb, where you want the levels sent to the effect to be relative to the main mix, preserving the main mix in what the effect sees upon input. Let's say you have your mix set up so your kick drum is louder than your snare drum. You would want the send to the reverb to reflect that so that they would keep the same relative levels, in which case you would use a post-fader send in general. But again, the knob there still modifies the send. So it's probably going to have a unity setting, and I haven't gone into the concept of unity. Maybe if it's not in here, we're going to need to add that for sure. When you use a post-fader send, you set that to unity, it's going to send at the level of your fader. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, I don't know why that's coming. All right, sorry. This is the live nature of things. Yeah, let's see, where was I? Sorry, where were we? Okay, so your if you have your auxiliary set to unity gain, and you can actually see the U on some of these if you're looking here. Let me zoom in. Then it's going to reflect the actual fader settings. And if you want to bump it from there, you can take it off of Unity. How do I zoom in this thing? Is this okay? Yeah. So you see these U's right here. That's unity gain. Okay, so in the case of the 1642, sends 3 and 4 are always post fader. Next, the signal goes to the EQ section. An EQ or equalizer changes the frequency response of a signal flowing through it. You can use an EQ to lessen the impact of problem frequencies or emphasize desired frequencies, or often to make an instrument more or less apparent in a mix without changing the channel volume much. EQs also have many varied and artistic and technical uses. Sometimes EQs are even used to control the dreaded effects of feedback. Right. So if you hear about ringing out the monitors, they're trying to take the feedback as much as they can out of the monitors themselves. Feedback is a huge problem live. And oh my God, hold on. All right, sorry about this. Maybe I might have to finish this next week. This sucks. Sorry. Yeah, let's go through this next week. This has actually been quite a bit of it. Let me finish the EQ section, and you guys let me know what we should change already. But sorry. Have a look at the block diagram for the mixer you're using, as the EQ may or may not be before the sends in the signal path. That's important. Where is your EQ? Is it before your faders, before your sends, your aux sends, or after? That can make a big difference to the way certain things behave, and it's why some people might actually have an outboard EQ that they'll patch in and stuff. Okay, I know I shouldn't get into this right now, but let's just do it. There are many types of EQs out there with many different peculiarities and features. But I write a lot better than I talk, and I don't write all that well. The 1642 has 2 shelving filters and a sweepable mid-peaking filter. The high knob controls a high shelf, which boosts or cuts the level of frequency centered on 12 kilohertz on up. So a high shelf affects that frequency and everything above it. A low shelf affects that frequency and everything below it. That's in theory. Of course, it's completely different in the real world, but just bear with me. That's how it's supposed to work. As opposed to a peaking EQ, which affects that frequency and not above or below it. Of course, it affects the ones above and below, but to a certain proportion. Let's see. The high knob controls a high shelf. There, we got that. The low knob controls a low shelf, which boosts or cuts frequencies centered on 80 hertz on down. That's in this particular EQ's case. There might be a parametric on the mixer that you're using. Keep in mind that earlier in the GINA control section, that's not a GINA control. In the what do we call it? We called that the gain control, not GINA. Woo. Let's change that to gain control section. This mixer features a high pass filter which cuts frequencies below 75 hertz. So the high pass filter was before the mic preamp, or right after the mic preamp, or whatever. Whereas the EQ is definitely after it. The mid part of this EQ has 2 knobs: the frequency knob, which chooses the frequency at which the mid EQ operates, and the actual mid knob, which is its gain knob for the mids, which control the cut or boost centered on the selected frequency. The mid EQ is a peaking filter. Now, the difference would be a parametric, where you would have a control for the bandwidth. How far are the frequencies where it affects? Oh boy, how do I say this? How wide of a range of frequencies does something affect versus how narrow? So you want to use a narrow EQ generally for cutting like feedback and stuff, so you're not hurting the rest of the signal. So it shows a picture here with the peak and a shelf EQ. It says this picture is meant to illustrate the difference between a peaking filter and a shelving filter. And I wrote that wrong, so it should be a peaking filter and a shelving filter. In blue, notice that the high shelf affects the frequency response from before the center frequency on up to the theoretical infinity, or whatever the bandwidth of the circuit is, while the peaking filter reaches its maximum effect at the center frequency with less effect above or below it. Next to the signal flow is, okay, so here's the business end of this thing. Boys, yeah, this is too much. Let's just get on to the EQ section and we'll finish this later. I don't want to bore you guys with an hour and I already took up your time with a bunch of tremolo stuff, which, hey, hopefully by next week, maybe it'll take longer. I don't know. I'll have one of these things on here and we'll try it out. And I can't wait to listen to Tommy, if you're out there, I can't wait to try those impulses out. I'll have something to say about those if I get them. So I'll see you guys later.